If you're attending, do you want to come closer to the stage? Feel free to come closer. Yeah. Yay, Alex. Hey, Jessica Quinn. Jessica Quinn.
Hi. How are you? Good to see you too. I know. Giants.
So, Katie share with you the way
Yep, I'm ready.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, of course. Exciting to kick things off.
Brilliant. And we're going to start in 4 minutes.
All
All
right.
right, starting promptly.
Because virtual people
Right.
exist. And we'll get to show for that.
Has it started yet? Has it started yet?
I can't hear anything.
Yeah.
We're good? Okay. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Radically Rural Arts and Culture Track, Session 1. My name is Katie Foltz. I am a Keene resident and an employee here at the Colonial Theater. So thank you for being here. We're glad to have the Arts and Culture Track in our theater. I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, the Putnam Foundation, as well as Jess Gelter and Arts Alive for putting together the Arts and Culture Track, and their partners, the Hannah Grimes Center and the Keene Sentinel. Before we get started, I'm just going to go over some logistics. The bathrooms are through the doors you just came through. They're to the right and the left. In the case of an emergency, exits are all marked. If you do go out the way we came, please muster in front of the old Miller Brothers building, or if you go out this side, please muster behind Margarita's. For those of you online, you will have noticed you can't see one another, but you can use the chat, so feel free to pop a hello into the chat right now and see how that works. Folks in the room can also use the chat. You can log into the Radically Rural using the links that were emailed to you. Click on this session, and then you can chat with participants. If you are using that function, please mute your phone so we don't get any feedback. And of course, while you're here, please do silence your phone. We are thrilled today to have speakers from the team from Citizens Institute on Rural Design, as well as previous program participants. The Citizens Institute on Rural Design is a partnership between the National Endowment for the Arts and the Housing Assistance Council. Courtney Spearman is with us from NEA. Stephen Sugg and Amanda Laporte are with us virtually representing HAC. So if you'd like to say hello in the chat, you guys can do that. We also have T. Fordahmed from Mount Zion Baptist Church Preservation Society and Jean Grigsby from Snow Pond in Sydney, Maine. Before I pass along the mic, I do want to take a moment to offer an acknowledgement of what has come before us and what we have and will be building our communities and institutions upon. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their hopes, dreams, and energy to make the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will, some were drawn to leave or fled another homeland to come with hopes of a better life. We must also remember that some who have helped build our communities have lived on this land for generations, centuries, millennia. Each of us conducts our business on traditional indigenous lands. In our chat, we are placing a link to map where you can search for your location and find names of indigenous communities that overlap where you are. In this way, we can all acknowledge and share those names in the chat box. Today, we are streaming to you from Ndakina. It is land taken without treaty by the British Crown. It was and still is the traditional homeland of the Sokoke, Pennacook, and Abenaki people, part of the Wabanaki, past and present. I honor with gratitude this land, the waterways, and the Alnabak, the people who have stewarded Ndakina through many changes. And now I am here, and I acknowledge the truth that most of our current institutions were founded on exclusions and erasures of groups of people and cultures, including the indigenous people on whose land we do our work. Uncovering truth and acknowledging it are critical first steps to building respect for each other and a clearer sense of our collective past. There are legacies of displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us all to where we are today, to share our radically rural ideas. This acknowledgement is not radical. I welcome you today by acknowledging the truths about who we are and how we got here so we can, with clarity and respect, build a brighter future together. Welcome to Radically Rural. I'm going to pass it on to Jessica Quinn of the Putnam Foundation for a few words of welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Hi, everyone. As Katie said, I'm Jessica Quinn. I am the CEO of the Putnam Foundation, and I am very happy to be here today. The Putnam Foundation is very happy to be sponsoring the Arts and Culture track here at Radically Rural. We are a family foundation based here in Keene and have been making grants to arts and culture organizations throughout the Monadnock region for almost 70 years. And we are very happy to not just support programs, but also support physical spaces. We see the value of physical spaces like the theater that you're in now and what they contribute to building quality of life and keeping a community vibrant. I'm happy to be back in the local area after having been away for almost 20 years and being off in much bigger cities. I grew up in Francistown, which is a town in the Monadnock region, population 1,500, and I feel like when I was in big cities and I would tell people that I grew up in a rural area, they kind of expected that I probably hadn't had much exposure to high quality arts and culture. And I would always correct them because there was nothing further from the truth. This area has been home to world-class arts and culture for decades upon decades, and I benefited from that as a kid growing up in this area. So I'm really happy to be back, to see my 6-year-old daughter now get to benefit from some of the same arts organizations that I benefited from, and to now be working with the Putnam Foundation to make sure that arts and culture continue to thrive in this area. So thank you all for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful experience here at Radically Rural.
Hi, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? Here and online? All right. I am Courtney Spearman with the National Endowment for the Arts, and I'm going to kick off our presentation on the Citizens Institute on Rural Design. Whoop, wrong direction. I'll figure this out. All right, just really briefly, agenda for today. We're going to do a fairly brief introduction to the CIRD, or Citizens Institute on Rural Design program. We'll have a story from Athens, Ohio, and from Sydney, Maine. We're going to have a bit of a Q&A time with folks here, and we would welcome questions from online as well. And then we'll break out into smaller groups for a little bit of peer engagement. And then closing remarks is really just saying thank you and sharing contact info, maybe sharing out a few things from your breakout groups if anything really compelling comes out of that. As I said, I'm Courtney Spearman. I'm with the National Endowment for the Arts. I manage the design grant program at the NEA and also the Citizens Institute on Rural Design. I'm joined today by T. Fordahmed from Athens, Ohio. She's going to talk about some work there that the Citizens Institute supported, and then Jean Grigsby from Sydney, Maine. We are all really excited to be here together with you online as well. So I'm just really happy to be participating in this program, and thanks to Jessica Gelter and Arts Alive for inviting us to be here. Before I dive deeper into the CIRD program, I'm going to share just a little bit about the National Endowment for the Arts and where the Citizens Institute on Rural Design sits within that program, or within the NEA. Through our programs, the NEA encourages activities that rebuild the creative economy and educate the next generation, unite and heal the nation through the arts, and serve the nation's arts fields. Our primary activities include grant making to nonprofit arts organizations, public arts agencies and organizations, and individual writers and translators. NEA funding is appropriated by Congress annually, so we are a federal agency. We directly award over 2,000 grants each year that support our mission and the goals of organizations across the country of all sizes. We are the only arts funder in America, public or private, that supports the arts in all 50 states and all territories. Staying true to the national in our name, we are also the only arts funder of any sort that make an award to all 435 congressional districts every single year. In addition to awarding grants, the NEA also conducts and funds arts research, manages national initiatives, and offers free resources like weekly podcasts, daily blogs, and quarterly magazine publications, as well as discipline-specific broadcasts and publications. By law, 40% of the NEA budget is appropriated by Congress must go to state arts agencies and regional arts organizations, which must be matched by other sources of funding, such as state appropriations. So I say this to make it clear there's a lot of NEA money that goes directly to state organizations. By supporting states and regions, the NEA can leverage additional public and private funding and make arts available to many more communities than we could directly through grant programs. Likewise, both the NEA and state arts agencies support local arts agencies through grant making, which can in turn serve hyperlocal communities and artists. So there are grant opportunities that go way beyond what NEA directly can fund, and I encourage you to look at our website. There's information about different state-level organizations that you can tap into. And just briefly touching on grants, again, I'm not going to get deep into any of this, but just want to highlight eligibility. Applications are open to both new and returning applicants. In order to be eligible, an organization must be based in the U.S. and be a nonprofit organization, a 501c3, a unit of state or local government, or a federally recognized tribe or tribal community. Organizations must have at least 3 years of arts programming prior to the application that they're applying for, but you don't have to have your nonprofit status for that full 3 years. You just have to have evidence of having been operating for that 3-year period. Generally, we don't fund individuals except through the literary arts, but you can support artists' work and designers' work directly through programs and projects that are applied for through these eligible entities. And again, single slide on this topic, so if anybody has questions or wants to talk further, I'll be here through most of tomorrow too. But NEA has 3 primary grant programs. They are opportunities that are available each year. The sort of what we think of as kind of our entry-level program is Challenge America. Grant funds are a little smaller for that, $10,000 each, and that program is explicitly designed to support underserved communities, and there's many different ways that can be defined. What I call our bread and butter grant program is Grants for Arts Projects, or GAP, and we have 15 different opportunities across different artistic disciplines each year, applying in February or in July. And then Our Town, which is our creative placemaking program, which looks at how arts and culture can improve quality of life and strengthen communities through arts engagement in partnership with local government and nonprofit organizations. We also actively support work in rural communities. Here I have just a few projects that have been awarded through design in Our Town in the past couple of years. Sydney, Maine is also on that list. I didn't add it here because Jean's going to talk a little bit about that work. But just want to highlight, we really do actively support work in rural communities. So just want to make that really clear, and we really love to see arts projects in smaller places. And then NEA has a lot of initiatives that we operate in partnership with nonprofit organizations and other federal agencies. Programs for youth, such as Poetry Out Loud and the Musical Theater Songwriting Challenge. Community-oriented programs, such as the Big Read, which is a community-based reading program, or Creative Forces, which supports veterans and families dealing with PTSD and related challenges. And of course, design and placemaking, or place-based initiatives, such as Save America's Treasures, which supports preservation work in communities, the Mayor's Institute on City Design, and the Citizens Institute on Rural Design. So with that background, I appreciate an opportunity to share those things out just a little bit. I'm going to spend some more time now and dig a little deeper into the Citizens Institute on Rural Design, or CIRD. It's a leadership initiative of the National Endowment for the Arts in partnership with the Housing Assistance Council. In addition, we have a strong kind of 3-way partnership with a design studio called To Be Done Studio. Focusing on communities with populations of 50,000 or less, CIRD's goal is to enhance the quality of life and economic vitality of rural America through planning, design, and creative placemaking. Since 1991, CIRD has provided design assistance to more than 100 rural communities in all regions of the U.S., empowering residents to leverage local and regional assets in order to guide the civic development and future design of their own communities. So your first question might be, what is rural design and why does that matter? Well-designed rural communities are places where people want to live and invest in the future. as the character of many rural communities is threatened by outmigration, loss of an economic base, and urbanization, designing vibrant rural communities is increasingly important. Good rural design goes beyond aesthetics. It fosters economic development and contributes to livability. Community cohesion and pride in place are often manifested through design. So what are examples of rural design projects? Historic preservation and adaptive reuse of community buildings, leveraging Main Street or local businesses for economic development, wayfinding or facade improvement, developing recreational trails for mobility, active transportation, and economic development, integrating cultural identity into the built environment to drive heritage tourism, designing quality, affordable housing that supports livable, equitable communities, creating public or civic spaces that support and integrate cultural expression, local identity, and encourage play and active recreation, redesigning Main Street as a local street versus a state highway or throughway, and designing spaces and places that improve access to healthy food and local food systems. CIRD is driven by the idea that design can be a powerful tool for rural communities to build on existing assets and improve quality of life, economic vitality, and experience of place. Through this program, we've learned that communities know their own needs best, and that the best ideas come from communities themselves. CIRD's approach to rural design combines community-driven aspirations with the technical and design skills necessary to move from an idea to reality. We also know that good rural design can take many different forms and show up at many different scales. CIRD's projects range from small interventions like murals or pocket parks to larger initiatives like creating a downtown revitalization district or a pedestrian safety corridor. With the guidance of architects, Main Street planners, landscape architects, transportation planners, and CIRD program staff, our programs introduce a wide range of rural design strategies that can help a community address their design challenges. So how does CIRD work? Overall, the CIRD program has 4 main goals: building design capacity in rural communities, introducing creative placemaking, arts, culture, and design strategies as drivers of economic development, facilitating a network of rural communities for design idea exchange and peer learning, and preparing communities to be ready and competitive for arts and design-related state and federal funding opportunities. We have 2 primary programs, customized multi-day local design workshops for specific communities, and a design learning cohort program that engages a spectrum of community leaders in peer learning and rural design skill building. We also host webinars several times a year and offer all kinds of community design resources through our website. The workshop program offers competitive funding to small towns and rural and tribal communities to host a local design workshop. With support from design, planning, and creative placemaking professionals, the workshops bring together local residents and community leaders to develop actionable solutions to their specific pressing design challenge. I'd also like to note that we actually worked with Arts Alive here in Keene this past March on a local design workshop. That workshop focused on public space planning and connecting individual arts and cultural projects in the city through public space and activating arts to connect those different elements. Jessica can tell you much more about that, as can several other folks who are here. But just want to highlight that they were a recent participant, and T is going to talk a little bit about her experience with the CIRD program in Athens a couple years ago. We also have a design learning cohort program where leaders from selected communities across the country are invited to engage in peer learning, training in design planning, community engagement and facilitation techniques, technical assistance for their community design challenge, and support in navigating funding opportunities to make their vision a reality. With that introduction to the program, I'm going to pass it to T. Fordahmed to share a story about her efforts in her community to revive an iconic Black church and community center in Athens, Ohio. But as we transition to T, I'd like to lift up the CIRD program goals one more time here and highlight where we see this program in the context of other place-based funding in rural communities. Each of these goals that you can see here and all of our activities are intended to be catalytic for the communities that participate. They help build capacity and offer strategies for next steps. A single workshop or even a year in the Cohort program may not resolve every issue a rural community faces, but our hope is that the participant communities emerge with a sense of energy, momentum, and new ideas for how design, arts, and creative placemaking really can build on existing assets and make a difference in their community. T, I'll pass it to you.
Okay, thank you, Courtney.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Okay, today I'm going to chronicle first where we are, who we are, well, from a historical and cultural perspective, what we started, when we began it, how we are now following our interaction and guidance by CIRD toward building capacity in our community. So here, welcome to the Appalachian region and the Mount Zion Baptist Church Preservation Society. We are situated, as you can see, in the southeastern Ohio River Valley along the corridor of what has become known as the Underground Railroad, where we learned as members of the CIRD cohort that good design not only helps us to preserve iconic structures, which is what we're trying to do, but can also transform a community and the way it views its history. The caveat, it also provided language that helped us communicate the idea of centering cultural design as a driving economic and community development force. I'm sorry. The laptop next to you, you can maybe... Oh, good. Okay. All righty. Good design preserves, as I said, community and its history. Quickly, the history. 1872, those who were escaping for freedom headed to North and the Star in Buxton County, Canada. Many stopped in this particular town. The town is gathered and shielded by many trees, one way in, one way out, so a lot of them stopped there. There was a brick-making industry as well as coal mining. So they built a wood church. Later followed another church that was built on land given to them by the Berrys, Edward and Mattie Berry, who are of the famous Hotel Berry. The Hotel Berry hosted President Franklin Roosevelt, Harding, and many others. It was unique for a black man to become an entrepreneur and own so much land at the time in this area. However, that's who Ed and Mattie Berry were. They offered all kinds of wonderful amenities at their hotel. They had an elevator. It is said that Mattie would send her workers to the rooms in the daytime when the men were out and gather their clothes and bring them downstairs. If they had buttons missing, she would put buttons on it and then hang them back. Had a Bible in every room, was probably the first to put a Bible in every room, sewing kits, etc. And the food, I understand, was excellent. Edward was a chef, and his oyster stew, that was it. So here you see the Mount Zion church that was built by freeborns, other indigenous folk, as well as the freed enslaved. In 1909, they started having services there. Here's the early choir in the 30s. The Cab Calloway Band was in the area playing at Ohio University, which had been the first university in the Midwest to begin in 1804. The Cab Calloway Band is sitting on the steps here at Mount Zion. They stopped by to visit while they were there praying for the prom. Here, the church thrived through the 40s and 50s. Here's a minister with some of his helpers. You'll notice the gender and sex of most of them, right? Okay. An annual homecoming event. And the church thrived. And in 1974, Ohio University hired its first black professor that became tenured. She was from Texas, and she said when she arrived at the church, there was no choir. She had never been to a church with no choir. So she immediately got started putting her students together and put together something known as the Gospel Voices of Faith. And I understand that the choir was so incredibly wonderful that people would park on the corner on Sundays or stand outside just to hear the choir sing. And here they are in national competition. They traveled all over the country. They took second place in the 1990s in this competition in New York. Over the next 20 years, the church began to fall in decline. Segregation dwindled, and the building, as I said, fell into decline. I understand that in the 1990s, that between 3,700 and 7,000 churches closed their doors. It has not stopped. It continues to decline. Here you see the mold that has taken over from a leaky ceiling, the peeling of the tin ceiling there. So in 2013, a member of this particular edifice, as the wrecking ball was coming after it, like it had torn down 3 other buildings that had been built by indigenous and black people in this community. They rushed in to save it. She had been baptized in the baptismal, one of the first to have a baptismal in the area, and she was also married there. So she got busy and put together what is known as the Mount Zion Baptist Church Preservation Society Board, of which I am a member. We raised enough money to replace a new roof by 2018, at 80 grand. We started our community outreach to what we now call stakeholders, and that is the language that we learned from CIRD. It's different from being a supporter, and I'll explain how that language transformed a community into, if you think about gambling, if you wager on something, you have a stake in it. And if that is a winner, then you get to profit from that stake. And that's the difference. A supporter can give you some money and can contribute, but if you're a stakeholder, doggone it, you're part of that. And that was the language that we needed. After that, well, I'll tell you more later. Our first stakeholder, which we brought in as interns at first, but now they have become stakeholders, was from the Scripps College of Journalism, the Media Arts Department and Communication Studies. These young people helped us to brand ourselves and become an entity for marketing. Here you see them at the Katherine Johnson statue. I took them to my former institution, a historical black college in West Virginia State University, because if they were going to be developing and marketing a black institution, I wanted them to have the feel of what a black institution was about. And so we spent our day at West Virginia State University. And here is the design that one young woman came up with. There are 24 windows in the church. The windows have been valued at between $1 million and priceless, because some of the glass that's there was manufactured in 1906 in Japan, and some of it is almost incapable of being reproduced. So this young lady focused on one of the windows that she thought would be a good marketing tool for us. We told her, look, we can't deal with color. We don't have that kind of money, so she made it a black and white rendering. And this is how she tied it together. Mount Zion Baptist Church Preservation Society, and since we're looking toward building it as a black cultural center, the logo will bring us together. Then we went to the College of Business. And the College of Business students spent a semester doing research with alums, with the business and surrounding city community, as well as the current students, to see what they might like the edifice to become. And their vision, a multi-space use, a space beneficial for the community, and different kinds of techniques to build revenue for us. That morphed into a catering, where they wanted soul food, okay, co-working space, and an event venue. Their 39-page executive summary was exemplary. They had a financial plan for us. They told us who our competition would be, and they gave us a marketing forecast and even where to go borrow money. Then we went to the College of Fine Arts because we perceived those 3 buildings that I told you had been torn down, and the one that left, they're now replaced by plaques, as so many of our buildings have been replaced by plaques or monuments. But when we took a look at it, they formed a perfect square if we included the World War I armory. So then we came up with the concept of Heritage Square, which we then introduced to the city. Oh, that is all they needed. The mayor took that up and ran with it. And I had to remind him, wait a minute. Mount Zion came up with that concept of Heritage Square. But that's okay. It's moving us forward. And then we also had community volunteers who helped to carry out the vision of, I'm sure, what our ancestors had thought about this church, which they called a beacon of light. When the pandemic hit, we had nearly 3,000 international students, many of them caught between a rock and a hard place. They couldn't go home, couldn't get out. Their stipends for the summer was taken away, or their internships, so they were stuck. It was the Mount Zion board that went together, and we raised about $2,000 and bought gift certificates from small businesses, from the farmers market, etc., in quantities of $25, $50, and $10. There's a little greenish-looking bucket that you see sitting at the top of the stairs. We put all of those in there, and the students could come by and take one out. By the way, that design is from a severely challenged group of young people in an art collective. So, as we started to put our information together, we needed to move on, and who came to our aid? Ta-da! The National Endowment for the Arts, CIRD, which I will refer to them in the future. We were selected as a partner community to work with the Citizens Institute on rural design. So they took all the information that we had collected, that the students had helped us come together with, and moved beyond what we had done, because all of our came from mostly the city. They went out into the counties and started speaking with folks who had helped, well, their ancestors had helped build this church in the city, went to the grave site where many of the people had been buried, had another term of language that we learned, a charrette. At this charrette, you see folks coming together, putting their ideas together as to how this community could actually bring in locally sourced foods and help to develop it as an economically viable community. And then, hit the down button, not the up one, came up with this incredible design. Now, we had just asked them to help us with the church. And as you can see, they have things that the church could become in terms of the basement as a tool for the students. One of the things that the students said, they wanted broadband because they needed a place to hang out, okay? They wanted an event venue. One asked, well, could we bring in Lizzo? I was like, wait a minute, I don't think this, well, our auditorium seats maybe 300 people, but nonetheless. But they expanded and found out that next door that building there was the parsonage, had been the parsonage. So that catering thing, CIRD said, turn that into a restaurant. And before CIRD said, have an outdoor venue for your food and rent the office spaces upstairs so that you could have revenue coming in all the time. And so you can see the inside there, which will accommodate many things in the basement. We now have the School of Medicine saying, okay, well, our nurses could practice with the elders and give them at least an exam once or twice a month. So we would have them in the basement also. But they expanded to the gentleman and woman that gave us the land, the Berries. That is the Berry Mansion right behind there. CIRD said, well, you're going to make all this money from your restaurants and your rentals. Purchase the Berry Mansion that was housing a fraternity that was in there tearing it the hell up, okay? Right now, there are a group of young women that are living in there. We told them the story, and they said, we'll take especially good care of this building for you and hope that you'll be able to purchase it one day. That will become our museum. Our students from the communication school took to social media asking if anyone had anything that had to do with Mount Zion Baptist Church as artifacts. And of course, from the entire county, people have started to give us things. We had to rent 3 or 4 storage units to put stuff in so they could go into the Berry Mansion, and the upstairs could serve as guest housing. And here's the vision that was sketched out by just an incredible young man from To Be Done by the name of Omar Hakim. Love that boy. Anyway, this is the vision that they gave us. The thing that happened following getting money from the NEA and having CIRD come in design, all of a sudden, we were a hot ticket. We get a call from the state saying, why don't you come to us for some money for blah, 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 blah. Okay, all right, we'll find a way. So we got this incredible young woman from Hard Lines Design Company to come in and do an assessment of the entire property and existing conditions and investigation. This woman was so thorough, we know what kind of dirt is under this building, okay? Here you see her with some of her engineers looking at the basement and the sanctuary, and you can see the condition that the basement is in because there had been water there for some time. And so from those 2 grants, then, we were able to go to Smithsonian National Trust for Historic Preservation and ask for money to put Mount Zion on solid ground. And we got it, only to find out that if we were to start shaking up that building, these $1 million windows would start to fall out because they were so old. The cams that holds the stained glass together is like rubber bands now, and they would start to fall out. So we had to go, that's why I put the oops. We had to go back to the foundation and say, well, you know, we're a uneducated voluntary board. We didn't know what we were talking about. Could we redirect that money toward removing those windows? And after a couple of days, they gave us a positive. And so that's where we're about to do now. And we have an extraordinary, wonderful company from the West Coast by the name of Inzolani Glass that won the contract that will be coming in and removing and storing those windows for us. Stakeholders. This is where the stakeholders unexpectedly did for us. All of a sudden, the number of entrepreneurs, the university, the city especially wanted to buy in. And that's how language persuades. Folks no longer, as I said before, desired to be supporters or contributors, but the language Mount Zion had been using, they now wanted to become stakeholders. So, as I said, the concept of placing a bet on Mount Zion and Heritage Square is perceived, at least by some, as a milestone that resonates with many. Let me show you how the stakeholders have come aboard. Jackie O's Brewery partnered with Weather Soul out of Dallas and created, at the beginning of the year, Black is Beautiful beer. It was a robust chocolate, not something I could handle. A half a can and I was out, okay? The first month's sales, we got a $4,000 check, okay? Another stakeholder, a coffee shop, decided they wanted to become part of that stakeholding thing, so we get their tip jar every month. A couple of months ago, we got as much as $600. Kindred Market, I was in your co-op today, which is a fantastic market. Kindred is similar. Every Saturday, 1 cent on every dollar is given to Mount Zion. Those are our stakeholders. And the disabled, developmentally challenged group, art group, sells signs that you see, like the Black Lives Matter sign here. We get 20% of each sale. Taking all of this together, we decided that we really had a message now that we could market, and we developed a documentary film, episode 1, which we call Athens, Black Wall Street, which I will be showing tomorrow night, a trailer from that particular movie at the Livability Slam. And hopefully you will accept it into your Monadnock Film Festival that's coming up. Here are the group of folk. Three board members, one a psychologist and curriculum and development specialist, couple of historians. Others are former students at Ohio University that now teach in other institutions who are coming together. And we received funding from the Appalachian Funders Network to make the first episode. Thank you very much for having us here to tell our story and to shout out our praises for CIRD. Thank you very much. Now, to hear another fantastic story, let me introduce my cohort partner, Jean Grisby, who will share her fantastic story. Here you go, the down button.
Thanks again, T. Didn't she do a great job? She's a tough act to follow. Oh, okay. How's this? Better? Okay. So thank you very much for your time and attention. This is a wonderful opportunity for me. And in case you don't know, oh, I'll do it. I'll do it. Yeah, I'll do it. Thank you. I was saying, as a testament to how much I appreciate this opportunity, I want you to know that I haven't worn a dress, heels, or pantyhose for at least 2 years. So you guys really rate. So I serve as a consultant to Snow Pond Center for the Arts, which is an arts, education, and community center in the Belgrade Lakes region of Maine. And I support Snow Pond's creative placemaking efforts. The Belgrade Lakes region is located between the city of Waterville, which is where Colby College is, and the city of Augusta, the state capital. The region consists of 4 towns, including the town of Sydney, where Snow Pond is located. In this region, there are 7 lakes and 136 square miles of farmland and wildlife areas. The region's population is about 15,000, and it balloons to 22,000 during the summertime, and so that's getting very close to the population of Keene. Snow Pond began in the 1930s as a summer music camp in the Chautauqua tradition. It has been offering social and recreational activities, education, and excellence in the performing and teaching of the arts ever since. In 2014, Snow Pond began developing its campus and expanding its programs to year-round. Snow Pond also began engaging in focused community outreach efforts, including having free community suppers, free concerts, and also creating new community arts programs. At the same time, Snow Pond expanded its mission to include improving the quality of life for residents of the region and leading sustainable prosperity efforts, emphasizing the creative economy. Oops, I think I maybe missed a slide there. Anyway, toward this end, Snow Pond applied and was accepted to the first CIRD design learning cohort. Our proposal was to use design to help address the crucial need to attract and retain young workforce-ready individuals to live and work in the region. The out-migration of young residents is reaching critically high levels. The town of Sydney has no downtown or main street. We proposed the design of an entirely new downtown to serve as a cultural district to attract and retain young talent, and ideally to create a hub of artists and innovators for the enrichment of the arts, education, and the overall quality of life. So the CIRD cohort was launched with an Energizing Summit where we learned what other communities all across the country were doing. You can see T is front and center, and Courtney and I are in the back of the photo there. We gained a lot of skills and tools, and we connected with national creative placemaking experts. Importantly, we were presented with an understanding of design as a process for addressing community challenges and a means for driving community change of all kinds. We enlisted the help of architecture students from the University of Maine at Augusta. Aren't they cute? I think they're so cute. The students were divided into 10 teams and asked to design storyboards of what a cultural district that is attractive to their generation and fits into the rural environment might look like. All 10 storyboards had valuable ideas. So as a next step, the students worked together to consolidate the best ideas into 3 designs, and then we took those designs and solicited feedback from the community. Going forward, the architecture students will continue to work on the design process with us as paid interns, and local high school students will be involved by working on smaller projects such as working on reports on renewable energy and sustainable living. We were really fortunate because we were able to attend the CIRD local design workshop in Millinocket, Maine, which gave us the opportunity to view a different type of design process, learn best practices, and build relationships. In fact, at the workshop, we met the landscape architect who would help us with the next phase of our design process. And all during this time, we continued to be engaged in peer learning through the CIRD cohort. One thing to note is that design helps people who don't necessarily have a broad perspective envision possibilities. Community members who didn't have a strong sense of what they wanted were able to react to students' designs and provide feedback. The town of Sydney and Snow Pond submitted a successful Nea Our Town application in 2020. And I want to take a moment to make the point that I don't think communities should be intimidated about applying for federal funding. There are entry-level grants that you can apply for, and the NEA in particular offers tutorials and a lot of support during the application process. Snow Pond has taken the next steps and developed the design plan for the cultural district, as you can see here. And we did this by working with a landscape architect as well as a design intern who was one of the architecture students. They further refined those initial designs and again presented them to the community for feedback through dinners and smaller gatherings. This view of the plan shows more detail of the design that includes a village with retail space and restaurants, housing, and green space. The idea is to concentrate buildings in one area to allow for farming and recreation elsewhere. The dark bars that you see in the lower middle are solar panels, and these are just some of the things in particular that young people said they wanted as part of the cultural district. This next view shows even more details of the plan. Notice the green space and the solar field, and if you can see them, the back buildings all have porches on them, and that's a nod to the Chautauqua tradition of front porch life and sociability. Now community members don't feel like they have to go to other towns for a sense of community. They have the opportunity to figure out what they want and develop it right where they are. The design process is transformative because in this case, something is being created from nothing. But it's more than that because of all the ensuing creativity around what that means for people's lives and the way they see possibilities for themselves and their futures. Through this effort, we've cultivated strong ties with all the towns in the region and with business leaders and community leaders as well. A lot of community members are accepting the idea of design as like an economic and community development driver. And then others, of course, are simply embracing the project and going along on the journey. And that doesn't mean we don't have our share of change resistors and naysayers, because we do. But we keep using word of mouth and social media and traditional media to tell our stories, always focusing on the positive. Most of our success is attributable to the relationships we've built and, of course, the support from the NEA. We know we will continue to be successful if we keep on cultivating, nurturing, and expanding those relationships. Snow Pond's leadership always takes an approach of acceptance and generosity and welcome for everyone, and that's a big part of the ethos. So today, Snow Pond and community participation are both growing. Plans for the cultural district are ongoing. We're starting to be asked to host arts organizations that are looking for homes, and we see that as evidence of the growth of our arts hub. As a cultural center, we've got a great lineup of fall concerts, and so please come and visit us. We're not that far away. And thank you very much for the opportunity. And thanks to CIRD.
Thank you, Jean. All right, we have about 10 minutes for Q&A. I'm very selfishly going to ask the first question because it's something I think is really fun to talk about. But if folks online want to submit some questions to the chat, we have folks here ready to receive those, and certainly here in the room, if you guys have questions, we will take those too. And I think we have a mic over here that's also live. My question that I think is relevant for both projects is thinking about the fact that these are both really strong projects and programs that are being led by nonprofit organizations, and yet government, local government, particularly T mentioned that the city has really begun to embrace the idea of the Heritage Square and the restoration work you guys are doing. I know from experience with the Sydney project that local government's a key partner in moving their work forward. So just maybe if you first and then Jean want to talk just a minute about that government relationship with your organization and how that's playing out with your projects.
Yes, thank you. Now that there's going to be Build Back Better money, about $500 million coming to the state of Ohio, and we understand we should have some shovel-ready projects ready for the southeastern Ohio, because about 11 million will be coming into there. So guess what? Our city mayor is running around from county to county asking mayors, what kind of cultural heritage do you have within your area? We need to go together with a strong body of cultural heritage and go after some of that money, especially since there is a town about 25 miles away that is developing an 87-mile motorcycle trail called the Bailey's Trail. It's very, very rural. What's the closest city? Athens, Ohio, okay? So we are now, I'm serving on a committee with a group, we've come up with a concept, live, work, and play in southeastern Ohio. And we're working with the city and other local groups like Rural Action, Chamber of Commerce, the Visitors and Visitors Bureau, trying to come up with this shovel-ready concept to go after some of that 11.3 million that is supposed to be coming into southeastern Ohio.
Our relationship with Sydney has grown a great deal over the past few years, and we are very intentional about our relationship with that town in particular, but also with all the towns in the region. We've brought people on board slowly, and it's really important because traffic is going to be heavier as a result of what we're doing, and there are zoning issues to contend with. And so that relationship with the local government, whatever that is so important. And then the other thing I'd like to say is that we had a tremendous amount of support and continue to with from our Kennebec Valley Council of Governments, and I don't know what the equivalent might be for you, but for us it's sort of the next level up, and they've given a lot of guidance to us, help us get some federal funding, and so you might want to look out at another layer of government or two to see what you can do to get some support there. And again, that relationship is really important to us, and we work hard to maintain that.
Wait, may I add one more thing? If there's a university or a community college located within 50 miles of your area, go after them. I can assure you the faculty will be happy to carry out your project rather than building something into their own syllabus, okay? And the students will love it because they're actually working on something that will go on their resume. It's not a fake kind of thing that's been developed from a textbook. It adds to their resume. So reach out to your universities. And of course, Ohio University now is probably, talk about a town-gown relationship, we got it going on right now.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I see a hand. I think we have a mic. So let's start with you in the plaid shirt and then up front, and then maybe we can go online if there's questions there.
So to that end about the universities, how did you access the faculty in the classes? Was there a center or a service learning office or some other front door to access that kind of university resource?
Well, The University of Maine at Augusta, the architecture program, first of all, has a stellar director, but the other thing is that community projects were already part of what the students were doing. So we were fortunate, we were just able to go and say, we've got a project for you, and it's been a wonderful relationship. So that's, just ask.
And I give kudos to that also. Go online, find out who's in the department doing what with something that matches. Call their professor and say, hey, let me help you out. I assure you they'll welcome you.
And I'll just add another piece to that. If you don't even know exactly what kind of resource or help you need, a lot of universities have a community relations department or team, and they're always looking for great ways to connect with local communities. So, you know, if you don't have a different specific idea, just starting with that group can be great. Do you want to go up front here? Yeah?
Hi, thank you so much for this. This has been really insightful and really great to learn from your work and your experiences. So I work in accessibility consulting and disability policy, and I'm about 2 hours north, but still in New Hampshire here. And one of the issues that I have to contend with a lot is kind of this constant, I don't want to say conflict because that sounds so contentious, but it feels that way sometimes, between historic preservation and accessibility, modernizing structures to the point where they can be accessed by particularly wheelchair users, but also people with all other kinds of disabilities. So I'm wondering if that's something that you've had to contend with in your work, and if so, how have you addressed that, or what thoughts do you have about it?
Just a little bit that I've worked on for an opera hall in another part of Maine, and the decision was made, the strategic decision was made to call it historic restoration as opposed to preservation, and that's a way to maintain, you know, the integrity of the space and honor the past and the history of the place, but also, you know, put in an elevator and put in a ramp and those kinds of things. So
We found out through the National Trust that restoration and rehabilitation are two separate things. Rehabilitation, you're not doing anything except propping it up, okay, and keeping everything exactly the way it is. Restoration, as she just defines, is a bit different.
I don't know if it's technically a legal distinction, but if you look at the Secretary of Interior, this is very nerdy, the Secretary of Interior standards on historic preservation, which is a National Park Service set of standards that are used nationally by the preservation community. There are actually 4 different definitions of work that are related to this: preservation, restoration, and I can't remember all. Rehabilitation, and there's another. So there's very clear guidance for the different kinds of work with historic properties, and there's a separate but parallel set of guidelines for landscapes as well for historic sites. So those are definitely great resources to tap if you have a historic property in your community that you think could be tapped for this kind of work. And the Save America's Treasures grant, which I mentioned a little while ago, is also a great source of potential funding for those projects. It's National Park Service money, but it also supports the preservation of collections, so archival material, things like that, as well as places and buildings. So just something to have in mind. Do we have any questions online, Nina? We have about a minute left.
Yes, we have a question from Stephen Sugg. The question is, can T or Jean expand on the value of peer-to-peer interactions via CIRD? I'm seeing such peer exchanges gain popularity among a number of rural-focused programs.
exchange. Okay. The value of peer exchange through CIRD was having calls where a topic would be discussed, and then we'd have the opportunity to ask questions, sort of developing our creative placemaking skills along the way. And then, sometimes we would find that a very different project actually related to ours. Snow Pond happens to have a high school for the arts on its campus, and so there was another education organization in Eastern Kentucky, and we really fed off each other a lot and learned a lot from one another. So that, those ties are the kind of things that worked well for us.
I have nothing to add. I'll just add, very briefly, the reason we started the Cohort program, which is now ending its second cycle, so it's been in practice for almost 4 years, was very much to respond to what we were hearing from communities that were doing workshops where they really wanted to connect with each other. And I think there's a real benefit to communities hearing from other people who are experiencing similar challenges, how they're dealing with them. And it's not to say there's not value in design, quote, experts coming in with expertise, but I think the experience of handling things at the local level is really valuable, and I think just a sense of shared experience, I think, comes out of it as well.
Add to that. Having the opportunity to go to the local design workshop in the other community in Maine was wonderful. It was so different from what we're doing, but if you have the opportunity and there's a workshop, somewhere in your area, I would highly recommend that you call ahead and ask permission, and then if you can go.
That's great, thanks. I think we are out of time now on questions, but really appreciate those. And if there are others, we can certainly do a follow-up. We'll have contact info at the end if people have things they'd really like to touch on. We're going to now move into some smaller groups. This is not meant to be stressful. It's supposed to be fun, so please don't run away. But our hope is that we can get in groups of 6 to 8. Nina, how many folks do we have online?
About 17, 18.
So Jessica, do you think 2 groups or 3?
I would say 3.
3, okay. So we're gonna, online, if you're able to join us for breakouts, we're gonna do, you have an opportunity to go into virtual room 1, 2, or 3, so pick one and try and divide up. And then in the room, we'll do a similar group of, I don't know, maybe 6 people per group, because we don't have a ton of time. But what we wanna do is have you just introduce yourself really briefly and what's your connection to a rural place, maybe where you're from, or in my case, the work I love to do. And then talk just briefly about a design, arts, or cultural project or program that's been transformative for your community, or an inspiring arts, design, or cultural program that you're aware of that you would like to just talk about that maybe has a strong aspect of community change. And then we're going to do this in sort of a story circle method where everybody does a relatively brief introduction of who they are and their project that they want to just briefly touch on. And then if there's time, we'll dig back in for a little more detail on what people share, but we want to give everybody a chance to say at least a small thing in the midst of the conversation. Jessica, anything else to add?
Yes, for the folks that are online, it's a bit tricky to get into the breakouts, but what you'll need to do is leave the live stream session, go back to the session description, you just click right on it, and then at the very bottom below the description, if you scroll down, there are 3 links for Zoom rooms where we'll be able to see each other and talk and all of that. So that is what you need to do if you are online to get into those breakout rooms.
Sounds great. And we'll meet for about 15 minutes, 17 minutes, and then just come back really briefly at the end. We'll have another slide with contact information, and if anybody wants to share out just something high level from their group, that would be great too. Thanks. So if the folks in the room want to just kind of, I don't know, gather in smaller groups around, we're going to come down and join you. Can everybody, oh, yes, I'm back. Sorry to interrupt. We are just about out of time. Is everybody from online back? Okay, we'll give them 1 minute. Sorry, I thought we were all there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead since almost everybody's back. I'm going to call out Dan for just a second because our group had a really fun kind of generative thing around an acronym or series of letters around, how would you describe it, Dan? I'm going to pass you the mic.
Oh, the A's. Well, yeah, we've come up with more since you left. So we have 6 A's for placemaking, I guess. And just from our conversation, they are alignment, access, agency, acknowledgement, action, and advocacy. So it seems like it could be kind of the spine of how you move forward. And it came from a discussion of what are the barriers? What are the, how do we reach critical mass? What do we do first? So I think it kind of gives a little bit of a barometer for, are these things present? So I think it's definitely the beginning of a list. So let's keep going. And it doesn't have to start with A.
Can we turn on this mic? Oh, good, it's on. You guys are amazing. The technology is fabulous. Does anyone from the other groups want to share anything? It's okay if not. Jean, sorry, can you guys, pass the mic to Jean?
How's your reach? So we've had a certain amount of conversation about the relationship between sort of the arts community, nonprofits, and local government. And one thing that was wonderful to learn at the summit, the CIRD summit in West Virginia, was that those people ran for office. They, they wanted to change their community. And so they were, on the planning board, and they were busy on the town council. And so, that made a big difference. That was game-changing. So something to think about.
That is great. Thanks, Jean. Nina, do you know if there's anything online? Is there anything in the chat that they want to share out as a group? Not at the moment. Okay. Well, I think we'll wrap here. There's another presentation that starts in half an hour, which will be fantastic. For those of you in the room, that'll be back here again, another arts track presentation. Just want to thank you all for being here. It was really fun to present and share what we're working on. We've included a link to the website here for the CIRD program. We have a webinar on next Wednesday, the 28th. Yes, that's next Wednesday at 2 o'clock Eastern time. You can register for that on the website if you go to resources and webinars on the CIRD website. We'll be talking about the 4 workshops that we did over the last 9 months, including the one here in Keene. So that'll be a fun thing to kind of hear about from very different types of projects in each community. And then contact info here for me and Jean and T. We're all here through most of the day tomorrow. So if anybody wants to ask questions or chat, I'm also happy to talk to folks about NEA grant funding if you want to track me down either via email or in person. Anything else? I think we're good. Thank you all so much.